As Christians, we probably have the greatest leadership example of all time, and that is Jesus himself. So, when we're thinking of qualities of a good Christian leader or Christian leadership qualities or traits, who better to look at than Jesus himself? So, I've got 7 traits that I see in Jesus. This is not an exhaustive list. We could go and probably find 100 to list, but these are 7 that I'm going to give you that are key leadership traits that you can see in the life of Jesus. So let's start. Number 1 is his priorities. So you think even from a young age, we have the story where he went and was teaching and talking at the synagogue, and his parents looked and found him, and he was talking about he had to be about his father's business. And we see this all throughout his ministry where he goes to certain places that maybe doesn't make sense to all of his followers and the people around him, but to him it's his priority. Maybe there was somebody he had to go heal, somebody he had to go teach to, someone that he had to impact their life, and he went and did that, even if it wasn't convenient or what seemed popular. So, in that way, we see Jesus showing priorities. So, for you as a leader, you have to have your priorities in order. You can't go around and try to be a people pleaser and do everything everybody expects you to. You have to focus on your priorities, do what's important, and make sure you get the task done. This could be if God is calling you to do something specific, you have to tell other people no because you know God wants you to do that one specific thing. You have to focus, have your priorities in order, and pursue what's important. Jesus had a plan. He knew why he was here on earth. He had his priorities and what he had to accomplish while here. His priorities were in order. So are your priorities in order? Number 2 is Jesus empowered his followers. So, one of the biggest things with leadership is the ability to pass on what you know. If you are a leader who holds all the information, holds all the control, holds all the power, and is not passing that on, that's not really very much of a leader. You're not giving anything to help other people or empower them to help them continue once you're gone. You have to be able to pass on your knowledge, your wisdom, and to help them. And there's another trait later that's very similar to this. But we see this in Jesus. He gave authority to his disciples. He gave power to them. He gave permission for them to carry the gospel and to go and continue the work in which he started. It wasn't that Jesus came and he taught, and once Jesus was gone, that was it. Jesus came, he taught, he sacrificed his life for sin, and then his followers took that. They carried the message and proceeded to go on. It was a message that didn't just stop with Jesus, it had longevity. That is important for you as a leader to make sure that your goals, what you're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to do, goes beyond just you. If it starts and stops with you, then that's a problem in your leadership. Focus and try to make it more like Jesus, where it goes about more than just you. Your message, your vision, and what your goals are more than just self-centered. They have a larger focus and a grander goal, a bigger meaning behind them. The third trait that I see in Jesus is his communication. So this is huge for leadership in any form of communication, whether that's public speaking, teaching, interpersonal communication, empathy, all of those things we can connect and relate those to communication. For Jesus, we think about it, we can look at so many examples where he preached a sermon. Great example, go read his Sermon on the Mount. That is full of great information where he's communicating to a crowd from a teaching or public speaking perspective. He's using stories, analogies, parables, things that are going to help his audience connect to him, to understand what he's teaching, to relate, and that helps them to understand. But we also see this in him talking to his disciples. He is just very down to earth, is a good way of putting it. He relates things to an earthly way, connects them in a way that makes sense, and helps people to understand his message. He makes it simple. That's key in communication. Keep it simple, keep it focused, and make sure your audience understands and is following what you're trying to say. Number four, we can see Jesus's compassion. We see this in him healing and caring for people, taking care of others' needs. He very much, in the next trait, you'll see this as well, but he very much was focused on other people. He had compassion for them. He cared about if their heart was hurting, if they were disappointed by something. I think about the story of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, for example. If you know that story, it's when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, but he saw the hurt and the pain that they were going through. And he also was grieved because they were friends of his. And when he arrived on the scene and Lazarus had passed away, we see the shortest verse in the entire Bible is Jesus wept. Jesus had compassion on the situation and for those who were suffering loss. We see that all throughout the Bible where Jesus had struggles. He understood what it was like to walk a day in the average person's shoes. He grew up in a carpenter's household. He was a carpenter by trade. So this is something he understands, and he has the empathy and compassion for others. Number five, and this directly relates to the last one, is Jesus was people first focused. So we've already talked about the healing and the compassion, the empathy, but here's another example. What about when Jesus went into the upper room with the disciples and he began to wash their feet? And we see the disciples, especially Peter, started to protest that he was the Messiah, he was their rabbi, he was their teacher. Don't wash my feet. I'm not worthy to have my feet washed. But Jesus was acting in a way that was just a humble servant. Jesus was doing something that was not customary for somebody of his role or his position. But that didn't matter to him. He was willing to put other people first to teach them something. That it wasn't about a position, it wasn't about a title, it wasn't about authority, it wasn't about any of that. It was about service. Jesus is the greatest example of servant leadership that has ever been on this earth. If you go and read anything about servant leadership and what it is to put other people first in leadership, Jesus embodies all of that pretty much. Jesus is one of the greatest examples of servant leadership. But in your leadership, do you put other people first? If we put other people first, focus on their needs, what their problems are, what they're going through, and ensure that they have what they need to be successful, then we can be a highly successful leader because other people are the priority. John Maxwell says it, and I fully believe it, that leadership is all about adding value to people. And we see this in Jesus' life where he added value to them. He took people that were disgraced by society, people that society didn't want, people that society didn't care about, fishermen and tax collectors and zealots and everything that nobody cared anything about. And he took them and meshed them together into a group and cared about them. Regardless of their background, regardless of what they had done, he cared about the people. And ultimately we see that in the plan of salvation where he was taking care of people, and it was out of love. The sixth trait that I will give you about Christian leadership principles, and using Jesus as an example, is teaching. So when we think about what Jesus did, he called specific disciples, and we've already talked about his communication. We talked about him passing on what he knew and to share things with them. But specifically in teaching, whether it was people, we see examples where he would sit in a house and be teaching. And we see Mary, for example, sitting at the feet of Jesus, listening to him teach. We see others who would come from great distances and just sit and listen to him teach. But specifically, he had his inner circle, his group of disciples that were his closest followers, and even the inner circle among that, which was Peter, James, and John. We see that group where he poured into them and was teaching them, sharing what he knew, sharing what they needed to be successful in carrying on the gospel. He shared his knowledge, was telling them all of the things that they would need, and preparing them, because he knew that there would be a day where he was not there to teach them and to continue to instruct them, and he wanted them to be prepared so that they could carry on the message. That is the point of teaching as a leader. It's not that you're sharing information so you can sit back and puff out your chest and say, look at all the great stuff that I've done. No, 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 that's not it at all. It is all about teaching, sharing what you know, sharing what you've experienced, sharing failures, sharing successes, things that will help future generations and future leaders to carry on a good work. That is a focus of leadership and is a key leadership trait that you need to have. Last but not least, and this is probably one that is the most self-focused, but is also vitally important, and that is self-care. So we see this in Jesus's life where he would go off alone to pray. He would go off by himself. He wouldn't tell anybody where he was going. He would just go off on his own and go pray. He was spending time alone. And what is the importance of this as a leader? This is your time to spend time alone and pray. It's your time to spend time alone and read and study and grow and develop yourself. It's time to meditate on God's word. It's time to reflect and evaluate what was a success, what was a failure, but also to think about where you are, how you can improve, how you can teach and pour into others. But most importantly out of this, it's about your mental health. It is something where you can go when you're stressed, when you're dealing with the troubles of life, when you're dealing with all the pressures of leadership and everything going on. Go off on your own. Spend time in prayer. Spend time reading, relaxing. Take some you time. Take some time where you can reflect, you can decompress, you can relax, calm your mind, and take care of yourself. Jesus took time for self-care. And if it was important enough for Jesus to go off alone and pray and take time to take care of himself, how much more is it important for you to take care of yourself and to take time for yourself to care about your mental health, your physical, personal health, all of those things. Take care of yourself. So these are 7 traits that we see in Jesus that are Christian leadership principles. These can be applied to church leadership, business leadership, whatever it is. This can be applied in your family life. But take these principles, use them, apply them to your life, and lead like Jesus. If you like these videos and want to see more like this, please let me know down in the comments, or let me know down in the comments which of these 7 traits surprised you the most or you found the most interesting. Be sure to subscribe and look for new videos every week.